Autumn, a season of rain, falling leaves, and a very special mood. This story is about a young woman who, on one such autumn day, felt sadness and weariness. Yet step, by overcoming her inner struggles, she managed to find light in her heart and discover new inspiration. We wish you a wonderful listening experience. Don't forget to leave a like and share in the comments where you are from and how you are feeling today.
October arrived like a sigh pressed against the window. Rain threaded down the glass in thin, hurried lines, and the town below Emily's small room wore the flat grey of a photograph left too long in the sun. She lay still and listened to the familiar hush, the same quiet that had followed her for months. Not peace, just the space where noise used to be. Autumn had once been her favorite. When she was a child, the season meant mugs warm enough to burn fingertips, long walks with her father through maple alleys, jackets hung outside to dry and smelling faintly of smoke. Now the orange and crimson only reminded her how fast color drains from anything you love. Leaves fell, promises thinned. Even her reflection looked seasonal, here for a while, then gone. She lived above a bakery that woke before dawn and perfumed the stairwell with cinnamon. Rent was cheap, the room was smaller than her old closet, and the walls held the kind of quiet that makes clocks sound arrogant. She was 23, working part-time at a cafe 5 blocks away. Friends had drifted farther than buses could reach. Her boyfriend, no, the boy she had once believed would share her winters, had ended things with a short message and a long silence. Space, he called it. Distance, she decided later. That morning she took her time getting ready, holding heat in her palms from a mug of coffee that never got sweeter no matter how much sugar she added. Her blazer hung poorly on its wire hanger. Her eyes looked tired but awake. On impulse she steadied herself by saying out loud, "You are not lost. You are early." The sentence didn't fit exactly, but it kept her from floating. The cafe's bell blinked when she pushed the door. The room greeted her with steam, the hiss of the espresso wand, a low hum of conversation stitched from strangers' lives. She tied on an apron and fell into the choreography she knew by heart: grind, tamp, pull, swirl, smile. She liked the way routine made hours obedient. She liked that customers didn't ask for her story, only their names spelled correctly in marker. Just before 9, the door opened and let in a gust of wet air and a man with dark hair damp at the temples. He shook rain from his jacket without apology and ordered a black coffee in a voice that made the word black sound like a preference, not a mood. He paid, pocketed his change without counting it, and took the corner table where the light was good. He set a notebook on the wood and opened it. She told herself she wasn't staring, then found herself wiping a clean patch of counter just to keep him in the edge of her vision. He wrote with quick economy, then paused to draw. She realized after a moment that his pen wasn't writing at all but sketching. Leaves at different stages of falling. A window rimmed with condensation. A face half turned toward light but not yet stepping into it. When he glanced up and saw her looking, he smiled like someone who knows what weather does to people. She turned away so fast she almost knocked a pastry case with her hip. He came back the next day. And the next. Always alone, always the same table, always that battered notebook that looked like it had seen more rooms than she had. Sometimes coffee, sometimes tea, once nothing at all, just him and the page. He never took phone calls. He never put in headphones. He never looked impatient. Emily was surprised by how quickly she began to depend on the sight of him, the way some people depend on seeing the same mailman at noon. On the 4th day he spoke first, the way you speak to someone you've stood next to at enough bus stops to pretend you've met. "Do you draw?" he asked when she paused, tray in hand, inches from the corner of his world. "No," she said too fast, then softer, "not really." "Not really is how drawing begins." He turned the notebook so she could see. The page held the cafe's window in pencil, rain running, the street warped by water, a ghost of a face she recognized as her own if she pretended not to. The likeness was not flattering, it was true. "I should nt," she meant look. She meant exist this naked in graphite. She meant be this moved by a stranger's attention. Her mouth chose, "I should nt be holding up the line." She moved away before he could answer, but the image followed her down the counter like a second reflection. That night in her room she faced the mirror she had been avoiding. Her eyes were tired. Her mouth carried the charred edge grief leaves behind when it burns down. But something small and warm was visible, too, like a pilot light, stubborn, steady, almost embarrassed to be seen. She touched the mirror with 2 fingers and wasn't afraid of the glass. The week after that, the cafe owner taped a notice beside the register with blue painter's tape, "Building sold. Last day of business, November 30th. The words looked temporary and irrevocable at the same time. Leela, the baker, read the sign and made a sound like a laugh that had been bent into a sigh. Mr. Paxton, who had managed the cafe since before she learned espresso, dabbed his eyes in the stockroom and said he'd been planning to retire but not like this. "Nothing has to end badly," said the man in the corner when she brought his check. He looked at the sign without the kind of sympathy that keeps you on the other side of glass. His was the sort of sympathy that had climbed through a window before. "Endings don't do the deciding. People do. You talk like you can fix it," she said, surprising herself with the bite in her voice. "I can't, but we can close the door with hands instead of wind." The phrase landed in her chest like a weight you want to keep. "How?" He used a napkin as if it were graph paper. "I know the community gallery on Alder Street. They'll lend a room. You collect names and memories. Leela bakes too much on purpose. Mr. Paxton says a few words and doesn't apologize for caring. People pay cash for mugs they loved and muffins they didn't need. Everyone gets to say goodbye properly." He slid the napkin toward her like an invitation. "I can make the call." She should have said she'd ask her boss first. She should have said a stranger's helpfulness always comes with a price. Instead she said, "Okay," because something inside her was tired of being cautious when faced with kindness. He stuck out his hand. "Daniel," he said. She took it. "Emily." The way he said her name made it sound like future tense. They built the farewell out of tape and time. Mr. Paxton cried openly and then cheerfully once his tears ran out. Leela shaped pastries like leaves that tasted better than jokes about autumn deserved to taste. Emily printed 100 blank cards and pinned them to a wall with a sign that read, "Tell us how this room held you." They came, regulars with mugs whose handles had memorized their fingers, a mail carrier who had ordered drip coffee every day for 11 years and never once found it boring. The student who had studied away 2 winters in the corner seat with the plug. The wall quilted itself in handwriting. Met the love of my life at table 6. Cried here after chemo. Found the courage to ask for a raise. Sat with my dad for the last time and the barista didn't rush us. The cards multiplied until the wall looked like a new kind of calendar. On the morning of the event, the sky cut itself on a blue so clean it felt indecent. A violinist who had played here for tips once set up in the corner and played for free. Someone brought a camera and said they'd email photos to anyone who wrote down an address. Mr. Paxton made a short speech with too many thank yous and not one apology. Emily didn't cry. She thought that meant she had grown hard. Later she decided it meant she had grown calm. In the mid-afternoon, a man walked in who made the bell sound different. He wore a coat too expensive for this street and smiled the careful smile of someone looking for an advantage he could call grace. "Emily," he said. Her hands recognized his name before her mouth did. "Ethan." She braced for tremor, for collapse, for the old choke of embarrassed love. Instead she felt like a book put back on the right shelf. "I heard," he said, tipping his chin toward the sign. "Shame. It's been good," she said. It was not a defense. It was a fact. He looked around as if the room owed him one more memory than everyone else. "You look good." "Thank you." She waited for the rest. "I was wrong," or "I am different now," or "Do you still?" But he had come with a pocket full of the wrong lines, or none at all. "I am moving back," he offered finally, as if geography were repentance. "New position. We should NT," she said, gentle enough to make it true. "I hope your new position is what you wanted." He blinked. He glanced past her to where Daniel was helping an elderly man tie a ribbon on a pastry box and looked briefly confused by a world that did not return him to the same room. "Right," he said, and left with a last look that couldn't decide what it hoped to accomplish. Later, when the last pastry had been bought as a souvenir and the violinist had accepted an apple in a hug, the calf exhaled. Mr. Paxton turned the open sign to closed for the last time and kissed the doorframe like a sailor kissing the deck. Leela took a picture of the wall of cards and made it her lock screen. The room felt like a field after harvest, empty and exactly what it should be. "Come with me," Daniel said. They walked 3 blocks under the kind of air that makes street lamps feel like moons. The community gallery on Alder Street framed their reflections in tall panes of glass. Inside, a new exhibit had been hung, falling still. Behind glass, pressed leaves were labeled with dates and weather, the way you label losses so you can believe you measured them. In the last room, 6 mirrors stood on easels like guests waiting to be addressed. Each mirror had a single word etched in its corner. Hold, let, go, stay, turn, begin. Emily stood before Let and saw herself without the distortion of pity or bravado. Young and older than that, tired and somehow awake, sad and more than sadness. Daniel leaned in the doorway with his hands in his pockets like he'd promised the building not to touch anything. "I don't like mirrors," she said. "They don't always tell the truth," he agreed. "What do they tell?" "Whatever you are brave enough to ask." She almost laughed at how easy he made it sound. "And what are you brave enough to ask, Daniel?" He shifted. Something flickered in his face the way light flickers when it passes through a moving glass of water. "To walk with you," he said. "Now. And when now gets tired." The sentence could have been a proposal if rings had been involved. Without them, it was better, a choosing made of present tense. They left the gallery for the small bridge over the creek where teenagers carved first names and future tenses into the stone. Water moved under ribs of ice with the same stubbornness hope uses. Daniel pulled a small brass circle from his pocket and set it on the rail between them. An old compass, its face nicked, its needle twitching like a small animal deciding. "It doesn't always point north," he said. "Then it's broken. Or honest," he said, smiling sideways. "Sometimes it points to where I am supposed to be." He nudged it toward her. "On days when the sky shows you nothing new." She lifted it and felt, absurdly, steadier. The metal had the chill of something that remembers winters. "I can't take your compass. It's not mine if it keeps finding you." She didn't have an answer as neat as his line. She slipped the chain over her head and let the circle settle against her sternum. The weight felt right, like a period at the end of a sentence that had needed one for too long. They walked back under a fine, invisible snow that made the streetlights into halos. At her building's door, he didn't lean in or step away. He stood the exact distance of someone willing to wait for your answer, even if your answer takes a season. She didn't invite him up. She didn't need to. They had already gone somewhere. In her room, she placed the compass on the windowsill where the glass could translate the sky for it. She stood there until her reflection stopped looking like a stranger. In the street, a single dry leaf worried itself free and fell without drama. She watched it land and did not mistake the landing for an ending. Her phone pinged with a message from an unknown number. Community hall needs volunteers for the winter fair. Interested? She typed yes before she could talk herself out of it, then added, I can close doors with hands. Before sleep found her, she touched the thin chain at her throat as if it were a wire connecting her to a steadier power source. Outside, the town adjusted its coat. Inside, something began that looked suspiciously like a beginning. In the morning, frost filmed the window like a question waiting to be answered. She woke before the bakery did, dressed without resenting the effort, and almost left without it, the compass. She lifted it at the last second and laughed quietly at herself. The needle stuttered and then swung, not north but firm, as if it had heard its name. On the stairwell she met the day head-on and didn't flinch. At the corner, beneath the baked bread breath of her building, a woman about her age stepped out of the thin sunlight and said, without preface, "You are Emily." "Yeah," Emily said, guarding the yes with a small smile. "I am Lydia," the woman replied, nerves bright in her eyes. "We don't know each other. But we both know Daniel." The compass at Emily's throat tapped once against bone like a knuckle on a door. "Is he okay?" Emily asked. "He will be," Lydia said. "There are things you should know before the weather changes." Snow that hadn't been forecast began to sift the air in flakes so fine they looked invented. The town moved around them as if nothing special were happening. The street made a small room from two bodies and a sentence. "Tell me," Emily said, and the leaf-colored season that had begun long before she noticed it turned the page. The morning after the cafe closed, the town felt overexposed. As if someone had pulled the clouds away too quickly and left every edge too sharp. Emily woke early, brewed coffee she didn't really want, and spread job listings across her small kitchen table like tarot cards. Barista, retail clerk, receptionist, night desk. Each card promised a future that looked suspiciously like the past. She circled two postings with a blunt pencil, rehearsed answers to questions no one had asked yet, and put on the only blazer she owned, a navy one with a loose thread at the cuff. On impulse, she slipped the compass into the inner pocket, close to her ribcage, where it ticked against her like a second, steadier pulse. Outside, frost filmed the sidewalks, turning footprints to quicksilver. The air smelled of smoke and metal. She took the long route to the bus stop, the one that passed the community gallery, because she had begun to trust the way mornings felt different when she let herself look up. At Alder Street, a familiar figure stood beneath the gallery awning, thumbing through a stack of flyers. Daniel wore paint-splattered gloves and a knit cap that failed to discipline a wild lock of hair. He glanced up, smiled the kind of smile that didn't need words, and offered her a flyer. "Weekend workshop," he said. "Paper crowns and leaf rubbings. I promised the gallery it'd conjure an army of small monarchs. I have interviews today," she replied, tilting the paper toward the light. "If they go badly, I'll come back and ask for a crown." "Deal." How's your armor? Light, she said. But new. He tapped the compass pocket without touching it. North? Somewhere, she said, and surprised herself by laughing. The first interview took place in a narrow office that smelled of printer toner and lemon cleaner. The manager, a woman with precise eyebrows and a calendar full of color-coded rectangles, asked efficient questions and made efficient notes. Emily answered without flinching. When the manager asked about resilience in changing environments, Emily thought of notes on a calf wall and said, "I close doors with hands, not wind." The woman blinked, then smiled as if surprised by her own approval. The second interview was a grocery store night shift position, stacking shelves, inventory, graveyard hours under halogen moons. The pay was steadier, the future felt flatter. Emily shook the manager's hand, thanked him, stepped into the cold, and felt the day tug in two directions like a wishbone. She chose not to break. At dusk, she returned to the gallery. The workshop had ended, but its evidence glowed everywhere. Tiny paper crowns abandoned on plinths, wax crayon shavings like confetti. A shy thank you note in bubble letters, for Daniel and the lady who laughs softly. A small army had come and gone after all. Lady who laughs softly? Emily asked, gathering glittered scraps into a single shining pile. You did, he said. Twice. She opened her mouth to reply, then shut it when the gallery door chimed. Ethan stepped in, hair neat, coat expensive, the room obligingly reflecting his version of the world. He saw them together and paused, the calculation in his eyes quick and clean. Emily, he said, as if speaking a password. Ethan, she replied, voice even. He glanced at Daniel, then at the crowns. I didn't take you for a gallery person. I am learning to be lots of things I didn't take myself for, she said. A brief silence opened like a trapdoor. Ethan smiled over it. I have news, he said, and the words tried to pretend they were a gift. I am moving back. New position. I wanted to see you before to apologize properly. Properly? She echoed, tilting the word until it showed its seams. For disappearing the way I did, he said, hands raised in surrender. I thought space would heal us. It didn't. It just, he let the sentence fall with practiced humility. Daniel remained a half step back, present but unintrusive, hands in his coat pockets like a promise to let her choose. The room held its breath, and Emily found hers. You hurt me, she said, the past tense landing like a period. I grieved you. And then I learned that grief isn't a country you live in. It's weather. You dress for it, and you go on. Something in Ethan's posture faltered. So that's it, she said, not cruel, not kind, accurate. I hope your new position is everything you wanted. He looked at Daniel again, as if the answer might be stored there, and found nothing useful. The gallery door chimed a second time when he left, a cleaner sound than when he'd arrived. The air after him felt wider. Daniel exhaled. You okay? Yes, she said, surprised by how true it was. I thought it'd feel broken open. I feel shelved, like I put something back where it belongs. They walked out into the early night without deciding to. Street lamps pinned cones of light to the sidewalk, their breath made small ghosts that faded quickly. They crossed the bridge where the creek frothed over dark stones, and Emily touched the compass through her coat like a superstition. What do you do on Wednesdays? She asked, casual on the surface, deeper beneath. His step hitched, small, but she felt it. Hospitals, he said. The pediatric wing. My sister spent years in rooms like that. I started reading to kids so the hours would behave. I want to come again. It's heavy, he warned, same words as before, softer now. I don't need it to be easy, she said. I need it to be honest. He looked at her then, really looked, the way you study a map before stepping off the road. Okay. They turned back at the far lamppost, past a poster stapled to a telephone pole, Winter Fair, volunteers needed. Emily stopped. Let's do it, she said. Volunteer, build booths, hang lights, teach paper crowns to strangers. I want to nail something into place that isn't falling apart. Daniel grinned. I have a ladder and poor judgment around heights. We're hired. They signed up that night in a drafty church hall that smelled like glue and cocoa. An old man with a badge that said Arnold pressed a clipboard into Emily's hand and called her kiddo in a way that didn't shrink her. By the time she went home, her pockets held a schedule, 2 peppermint sticks, and a rusty screwdriver that Arnold swore was lucky. Sleep came late. When it did, it brought no falling dreams, only a steady field of snow under a navy sky. She woke without panic and listened to the town stretch into morning. The compass lay open on the sill, its needle stubbornly refusing north, tugged instead toward something warm and near. Wednesday smelled like citrus cleaner and bravery. They read stories in voices that tried to be bigger than the machines. A boy with a pirate blanket fell asleep mid-chapter. A girl named Hannah drew a crown on Emily's hand and announced, with professional seriousness, that it made her queen of not giving up. On the way out, Daniel paused in the lobby where a donation wall wore names like constellations. His finger hovered over a small brass plate engraved Mara. He didn't touch it. He stood with his hands at his sides like it might shatter if he did. Emily stood with him and didn't reach, because sometimes love is not touching. Outside, the air had changed, colder, cleaner, threaded with the first rumor of snow. A message pinged her phone, the first job had called back. We'd like to offer you the position. She laughed aloud, and the sound startled a flock of pigeons into silver. Good news? Daniel asked. I get to close doors with hands, she said, and he understood. They celebrated with cheap soup and better bread on a bench that pretended to be warm. He told her about a mural he wanted to paint under the bridge where teenagers carved initials into stone. She told him about a winter when her mother taught her to braid together 3 kinds of light: candlelight, daylight, and the kind you make yourself. They sat until the bench admitted defeat and the cold smuggled them home. The first snow arrived at midnight with no ceremony. By morning, the town wore a new face. The gallery windows were frosted at the corners like letter paper. Children tested the world with open mouths and discovered it tasted like purity and old coins. Emily buttoned her coat, pocketed the compass, and walked out into a day that asked for her instead of merely allowing her. At the corner, a shadow separated itself from the brickwork and solidified into a woman about Emily's age, pale, quick-eyed, wearing a thrift store coat with elegance. She stepped into Emily's path with the intention of someone used to not being seen. "You are Emily," the woman said. It wasn't a question. Yes. The woman's mouth twitched, relief or nerves. "My name is Lydia," she said, and the name sounded like a key turned in a lock. "We don't know each other. But we both know Daniel." The compass in Emily's pocket tugged hard, as if the needle had heard its name. "Is he okay?" Emily asked, the snow on her collar suddenly too cold. "He will be," Lydia said. "But there are things you should know before the weather changes again." Snowflakes caught in Lydia's lashes like small, bright lies. Behind her, the town kept moving, unaware that someone had drawn a circle on the ground and set 2 people inside it. Emily's breath plumed and vanished. She thought of doors, of hands, of wind. "Tell me," she said, voice steady, feet braced. Lydia's gaze flicked to the compass shape beneath Emily's coat, then back to her face. It's about his sister, she said. And the promises he made after. The world narrowed to the space between their boots and widened to the size of a storm. Lydia's words struck like frostbite, sudden, deep. Leaving no mark on the surface but changing everything beneath. They stood in the snow-dusted street, and Emily felt as if the ground itself had leaned slightly out from under her. His sister? Emily repeated, struggling to shape the words. He told me she was gone. She is, Lydia said softly, almost reverently. Mara was my cousin. I was there the night Lydia stopped, breath fogging the air. Daniel made her a promise. And he's been keeping it every day since. Emily's heart tightened. The hospital visits. Yes. For the children. But there's more. Mara's last months were complicated. She didn't want treatment in the end, but Daniel couldn't let go. He begged the doctors, he begged us all. When she passed, he swore no one else would feel as forgotten as she did. That's why he still goes. That's why he never stops. The snow fell thicker now, soft and relentless. Emily's hands shook inside her pockets. Why are you telling me this? Because he won't, Lydia said. He carries it like armor, but it cuts him too. And if you are standing next to him, you deserve to know what you are holding up. Emily's throat tightened. A dozen conversations replayed in her mind, his pauses, his careful smiles, the way he avoided questions about himself. She had thought it was kindness, or patience. Now she realized it was weight. Thank you, she whispered. Lydia nodded once and stepped back into the drifting snow. Take care of him, she said, and was gone. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Her room felt too small, her thoughts too loud. She stared at the compass on the windowsill, its needle twitching as if restless. She thought of Mara, of promises, of Daniel's quiet eyes. She wanted to call him, to ask everything, but fear sealed her throat. By dawn, exhaustion had made her fragile. At work, she dropped a stack of files, snapped at a coworker, and retreated to the bathroom to breathe. In the mirror, her reflection looked like a stranger again, pale, frayed, almost angry. At lunch, her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel, snow's heavy tonight. Want to walk? She stared at the screen until the letters blurred. She typed back, yes. The park was hushed, buried under fresh snow. The lampposts glowed like sentinels, their halos blurring in the white air. Daniel stood waiting near the bridge, his hair damp, his coat dusted with flakes. He smiled when he saw her, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. They walked in silence, boots crunching softly. The creek below was half frozen, the water muttering under its icy breath. Finally, Emily stopped. Why didn't you tell me? Daniel froze. He didn't ask what she meant, his stillness was answer enough. Lydia came to me, she continued, her voice trembling with more than cold. She told me about Mara. About the promise. About the hospital. You hide it all like I am too fragile to know. He looked away, toward the water. It's not hiding. It's sparing. I don't need sparing, she said, louder now. I need truth. All of it. Or else I don't know who I am walking beside. His jaw tightened. The truth is ugly. It doesn't fix anything. It just reopens wounds. Then let them bleed. She cried. A passing gust tore the words from her lips, scattering them into the night. Don't you see? You carry it alone because you think it makes you strong. But it's breaking you. And if you keep shutting me out, it will break us too. Daniel's breath came fast, clouds rising like smoke. Mara was everything, he said finally, his voice raw. She believed in me when no one else did. And I failed her. I wasn't there the night I should have been. I promised I'd never let anyone else feel abandoned like that. It's the only way I know how to live with myself. Emily's chest ached. She reached for him, but he stepped back, snow crunching between them. You don't need my ghosts, he whispered. I need you, she said, her voice breaking. Silence. The snow fell heavier, erasing footprints almost as soon as they made them. At last, Daniel whispered, maybe that's the cruelest thing. Because I don't know if I can give you me without giving you her too. The storm thickened, swallowing their words, their shapes, their world. Emily turned away, tears hot against the cold. She walked blindly, not caring where, until the compass in her pocket pressed hard against her ribs, as if begging her to stop. But she didn't. That night, Emily cried harder than she had in years. Not because of Daniel's ghosts, but because she feared she had lost the one person who had shown her she was still alive. The days after blurred. At work, she smiled mechanically. At night, she wandered the frosted streets, half hoping to see him, half dreading it. Her phone buzzed once, a short message, I am sorry. She typed a reply, deleted it, typed again, deleted again. In the end, she left it unanswered. The winter fair approached. Lights were strung across the square, booths hammered together, laughter echoing through the cold. Emily helped hang garlands, her hands numb, her heart heavier still. Each child's laugh cut her like glass, reminding her of the hospital wing, of Daniel's voice reading stories, of crowns on her hand. The fair opened on a Friday evening, music swelling, fireworks cracking like sudden joy. Emily stood in the crowd, lantern light flickering in her eyes. She searched every face, every shadow, but Daniel was nowhere. And for the first time, she wondered if he had already left her behind. The winter fair burned like a lantern against the darkness of December. Strings of golden lights draped the square, casting warm halos on the snow. Children ran with candied apples, couples strolled arm in arm, laughter tangled with music from a small bandstand where violins and guitars played folk songs older than memory. Emily stood near the edge of the square, wrapped in her coat, the compass heavy in her pocket. She tried to smile when others passed, but her heart was elsewhere, caught between absence and hope. Daniel was not there, or if he was a shadow she could not find. She turned to leave, feeling the night fold around her, when she heard it, her name, spoken low, almost lost in the crowd. Emily. She froze. Slowly, she turned. And there he was. Daniel stood a few paces away, his coat dusted with snow, his face pale but lit from within by something fragile, something fierce. His eyes sought hers like a compass needle snapping home. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she breathed, "You came." "I almost didn't," he admitted. His voice trembled, not with cold but with truth. But every step away felt wrong. Every silence felt heavier than the storm inside me. Emily's throat tightened. The crowd, the music, the lights, all faded, leaving only the two of them in the hush of falling snow. He stepped closer. "I was afraid," he said. "Afraid that if I gave you everything, the grief, the guilt, the ghosts, you'd see how broken I really am. But then I realized you already saw. You saw from the beginning. And you stayed." Her eyes burned with unshed tears. "I stayed because you gave me back to myself. Because you reminded me I wasn't dead inside. Even when you were carrying all that weight, you carried me too." Daniel's hand shook as he reached into his pocket. He drew out the compass, the same brass circle she had carried, but now the chain was looped through a small silver ring. He held it out, trembling, as if offering not just metal but his heart. This compass, he said, voice breaking, never pointed north. It pointed to what I was most afraid of losing. And it always led me to you. Emily, I don't have a perfect life to give you. I don't even have a whole heart. But I have this promise. I will walk beside you, through every season, through every storm. Will you marry me? The world stilled. Snow drifted softly around them, muffling the fair's noise into silence. Emily felt the cold on her skin, the heat in her chest, the truth in her bones. Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered, yes. She stepped forward, closing the space between them, and he slipped the ring onto her finger. It was simple, silver, almost plain, but in that moment it glowed brighter than all the lights of the fair. The crowd around them burst into applause, not because they had heard the words, but because the sight of two people colliding with love is always visible, always radiant. Daniel kissed her forehead, then her lips, and she tasted salt and snow in promise. When they pulled apart, his eyes were wet, his smile unsteady but true. You've given me something Mara always wanted me to have, he said softly. What? She asked, voice trembling. A future. Emily pressed her forehead against his, and for the first time in years, autumn no longer felt like an ending. It felt like a beginning. They walked home together through the hushed streets, their footprints pairing side by side in the snow. Emily touched the ring again and again, as if to be sure it was real. Daniel's hand never left hers. At her door, they stood for a long moment, reluctant to part. The world outside was still full of grief and ghosts and shadows, but the world inside them was full of something stronger. The days after the proposal felt unreal. Like pages torn from someone else's story and handed to her. Emily woke each morning expecting the weight of her old emptiness, but instead she found Daniel's warmth lingering in her memory, his voice echoing like music she didn't want to end. The silver ring on her finger caught the light whenever she moved, as though it wanted to remind her, this is real, this is yours. The town changed too, or maybe she finally noticed it. The winter fair spread across the square for a week, laughter rising above the snow, lanterns swaying in the wind. She and Daniel helped take down the decorations afterward, hammering boards loose, folding strings of lights, sharing cocoa in paper cups. The work was ordinary, but it was alive, and she found herself smiling without forcing it. One evening, as they walked home, Daniel stopped by the bridge. The creek below was frozen, a mirror of pale blue beneath the moon. He leaned against the railing, silent for a long time. I keep thinking about Mara, he said finally, his voice quiet but steady. How she would have loved this fair. How she would have laughed at my terrible crown-making skills. Emily touched his arm gently. SH is part of you. That doesn't mean she has to be a chain. She can be a light. Daniel turned toward her, eyes shining in the dark. You make it sound so simple. It isn't, she admitted. But maybe that's why we do it together. Winter deepened. Frost glazed the windows each morning, and the world outside turned into a painting of white and silver. Emily started her new job at the office with the precise calendar lady, and though the hours were longer than the calf, she felt a kind of pride in showing up each day. She was learning to belong again. On Wednesdays, she and Daniel went to the hospital. The children greeted them with crowns and drawings, filling the sterile halls with sparks of joy. Emily discovered she had a gift for stories. She could take the smallest thing, a leaf, a button, a shadow, and turn it into a tale that made the children laugh or dream. Danielle would sketch the characters she described, and together they built worlds where no one was forgotten. At night, when she lay in bed, Emily no longer feared the silence. It was no longer empty, it was full of whispers, of promises, of tomorrow. Spring came late, but it came. The snow receded, the trees stretched their arms, and the world exhaled green. On the first truly warm day, Emily and Daniel sat in the park where they had first walked together. The air smelled of new grass and blossoms. "Do you realize," she said, smiling, "that autumn brought us here?" Daniel nodded. "The season I hated most. The season I feared most," she said. And yet, he reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers. "It gave us everything." Emily leaned her head on his shoulder, closing her eyes. She thought of the girl she had been months ago, tired, hollow, drifting. She thought of the leaves falling outside the cafe window, of the compass, of the storm of grief and love that had carried her here. She felt the ring press softly against his hand. "Do you still hate autumn?" she asked. He kissed her hair and whispered, "No. Now I hear its voice." "What does it say?" "That nothing truly ends," he said. "It only changes shape." Emily smiled through the tears that came unbidden. She looked up at the sky, where a single leaf, left over from last season, still clung stubbornly to a branch. The wind tugged, and at last it let go, spinning gently toward the earth. This time, she didn't see loss. She saw renewal. And she knew, with a certainty deeper than fear, that every season from here on would be theirs.